Give me a second. It will rely soon.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I am Ismail Suardiweke from Setia Abdul Haris, Sekolah Tinggi Ilmu Administrasi Abdul Haris. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa syukrilillah wa la hawla wa la quwata illa billahil alil azim. Tonight, we are happy that Professor Dr. Marta Beck from Arkansas, USA, already with us, and she will discuss um, one topic about Pancasila and ancient Greek civilization from the philosophy context. She is a professor in the Lyon College, and it might be we have still time. Prof. Marta will let us now a bit little about the college over there in US in the city of Arkansas. Tonight, this is the first from the 3 series of our online meeting about the cooperation, extending cooperation between Indonesia and USA. And then we are happy and thankfully because Professor Beck is here. She is in Indonesia, and I already discussed with her that I will meet her face to face on the 3rd of July in Jakarta, inshallah. And then we will have opportunity to host her in Makassar on 26th of July. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who are Muslim, I will invite you to recite Basmalah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, for starting our meeting tonight. And then without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Marta Beck from Lyon College, the city of Arkansas, United States, America. So we have 10 to 15 minutes, Prof, and then I will open for Q&A to the floor. Thank you, and time is yours.
Okay, so I'm only supposed to talk for 10 minutes, sir.
You can present 10 to 15, or if you like, you can up to 20.
Okay. All right. So let's see. For starters, I'll say that I do teach at a small liberal arts college, and the history behind liberal arts was that in the US, these schools were founded by people related to a religion, a denomination of Christianity, but they wanted the future leaders to be educated in a way that united their faith with reason and with science and social science. They wanted to make sure people don't use religion to say or think whatever they like. So you had to unite reason and faith. And they knew you have to do that if you want a democracy, because if you don't do that, anyone can believe anything a politician can say he's doing what God wants and get away with anything. That was what happened in Europe. And so it was a really important part of preserving a democracy was to unite reason and faith and to do it through higher education. So that's an important context. Nowadays, most PhDs get it from research universities and they specialize, and it doesn't, the teachers were supposed to be like substitute parents. They were supposed to be moral leaders. They were supposed to be engaged in the community. But for research universities, they're not. They stay in their office. They stay in their labs. So that's for starters. All right. So my first talk is going to be about the religion of ancient Greece. And the reason why it's good to study this is, first of all, the lessons are excellent, but nobody takes it literally, right? So today in Islam, in Christianity, in every religious tradition, there's a branch of people that take it literally, and there's a branch, and usually they split it off from reason. And then there's a branch that interpret it humanistically. And so Greek humanism is very, very compatible with the same worldview and the same ethics, the same way of life as all of the traditions. So I don't have time today to talk about, I will in the third lecture, the virtues of Aristotle and how Socrates, Jesus, Mohammed, Buddha, Confucius, and a Hindu guru all have the same virtues and the same way of life. So that's where we're headed. But today I want to talk about the Olympian gods. So this tradition is not literal. The people who, the educated people who were in Greece, they knew that these stories are not literal. There aren't 12 gods living on Mount Olympus. And so nobody talking to me right now or listening is going to think there's 12 gods living on Mount Olympus, and we don't have to disagree about that. They're symbolic. So the stories are symbolic. They're symbolizing patterns in human affairs, okay? They're pattern recognition. The kinds of people get in certain types of situations, they think in certain types of ways, they act in certain types of ways. And so you're supposed to use analogies between the story and your own life, but that's a dialectical tradition. That's what I like about Panchasila, is that it's a dialogue. And that's Panchasila number 4. You get through to wisdom through dialogue. So Panchasila has the belief in God, but it covers all the religions. That's what is true of the Greeks. That it has humanitarianism is principle number 2. Greek humanism is humanistic. It has unity in plurality. It's very pluralistic, and people have different passions in life, and they're all valid. And it's a social justice. There's much more involvement of government in providing for education and healthcare. It's much more engaged. Political community is very much a part of life, unlike in the US, where there's a minimal government model. It's okay. And it's also incarnational. So the whole point of it is to incarnate. It's a way of life. It's just assumed that the whole point is a way of life. It's not an orthodoxy. So you aren't Christian because you have a set of beliefs. You're Christian because you live a certain way of life. And if you don't live that, you're not Christian. Okay, so the bottom line is, how do you live? And so the stories, also the poets write stories. So the poets and the arts were much more important than the sciences for teaching us how to live. And even when they studied the sciences, you think of yourself as a microcosm in the macrocosm. Here's the universe. We're born to understand it, not to manipulate it, not to change it, but to understand it. And our place in the universe is for human beings to create civilizations that are integrated with nature, not at war against nature. So let me go to the PowerPoint and explain the deities. So there are 12 Olympian deities, and each of them represents one of the sacred passions. They're both natural and spiritual at the same time, because they're living for the sake of something greater than yourself. That's what we are meant to do. When we live for money or power or pleasure or glory, where it's perverted, it's unhealthy. People who do that are not healthy, and they're not happy. they don't flourish, and they hurt other people. So what's natural is to live for the sake of something greater than yourself. So we live in different communities. We start out with families in order to survive. Then we come together into economic systems in order to survive more efficiently. But then after that, we develop communities based on the desire to have a good life, a high quality of life, a completely human life. And that involves intellectual inquiry, the natural desire to understand the natural world, science, free artistic expression, it's natural for us to create music and dance and storytelling. That's all natural. So that's what the stories are about. It's a culture that values the poets. All right, so and the highest level of community, political community, is scientific inquiry, artistic expression, citizen engagement in public life as a citizen. You have to think about yourself in relation to people you don't know personally. So this goes way above anything an animal can do. And you have to think universally. You have to have empathy. What if I were that person? What sort of laws, what sort of institutions do we need so that everyone can flourish, even people who are different than me? So that's justice. If you're good at creating laws and institutions that promote everyone's ability to flourish, then that's your sacred passion. And that's Zeus. Zeus is the god of justice. And then there's also a male and a female for each one of these. So, and the need to balance them out. The other aspect of this tradition is it's cathartic or purgative. It tells stories of what happens when somebody with this passion goes too far. They go to an extreme and they get obsessed. And when they do that, they do a lot of damage. They hurt each other. The gods hurt each other. And in the stories where human beings are possessed by a god, that human being does damage. So, for example, if you're so obsessed with justice that you don't notice your institution is emitting a whole bunch of carbon and you're damaging the planet. So that's Demeter, the god of the earth, the god of fertility. So you're harming her, okay? Or the other thing that powerful men tend to do is that as a matter of exercising their power, they want to have sex, especially with young women, but they want to have as much sex as they want, right? It's part of power. So that's what Zeus and Apollo, these guys are doing this, and it always causes problems. They damage the women that they oftentimes rape. The women don't want sex, so they rape goddesses and women. And then the children that are born are very dysfunctional psychologically. So this is symbolic because it represents passions in the human psyche. It's a kind of psychology. And it was thrown out in the Enlightenment. It was replaced with a blank slate psychology, and that's just wrong. So I'll try to convince you that this is a much better psychology. Plus, the focus most of all is those instinctual drives, the drives we have that are closest to the brainstem, that we're most likely to destroy culture, to attack people. So sex drive, very powerful. You have to tell these stories about when Zeus goes and has sex and he does all this damage. So people listen to the story, watch a play and their own fantasy life, right? They can identify with the desire to do that. The play shows you all the harm it does. So you go away from it, not with purging that, flushing that out of your system. So you don't even want to do that anymore. You want to do something creative. You don't want to do something destructive. Okay, so that's Zeus. That was one of his flaws. He had a number of them, but we'll go with that one. Athena is the goddess of justice, war, and the art. She's also the goddess of wisdom. She's the wisest. So the one that's the wisest of all is actually a woman. And in another set of symbols, the symbol for Sophia or wisdom, the highest intellectual virtue, is also a woman. So bravo, because women represent the part of our psyche, anima, which is creative, whereas men represent aggression, and that's what's most likely to become destructive. For women and the anima, it's creativity, and it's most likely to get wounded, to be very vulnerable. And the men, it's not just men, it's the aggressive drive which women can have. And that's Athena's weakness, actually. She identifies with her father, and she, politics, and she's always out there in the public realm. But she sometimes ignores the women who are at home taking care of children, because she doesn't realize how much meaningful work they do. So that's her weakness. That's her blind spot. And if you just look at women politicians, they're like that. I never understand why Sarah Palin can have 5 kids and think that she's actually taking care of those kids. She just leaves them with somebody else. So that's a problem. And the other thing, okay, so she has a little brother, Ares, the god of war. And so I'll tell you about him. She also is a weaver. She weaves cloth. So when she's out in the political sphere, she's weaving people together, because the only way to have a meaningful political community is you have people who have trust and goodwill for each other, and they honestly care about each other. But she's a leader that weaves people together. Then she comes home and weaves clothing and then gives that to people. So they have the material needs of their life and they have the spiritual needs of their life. Okay, Poseidon is the god of the sea, and he's also the god of fresh water and freshwater springs and hurricanes, the wind. So this is important because when people go to an extreme, when human beings step outside of their natural bounds, which is the #1 evil, which you can translate as pride, or you can translate it as lack of gratitude, right? Or a failure to be submissive to what you should submit to, which is you don't run the world, the natural world. So if you offend Poseidon, right, he's going to blow the wind. He's going to make the wind come. He's going to make the hurricanes. You're not going to have any fresh water anymore. So this is very relevant. That is what we're doing. And we do have the sea, we're having floods and we're having all sorts of natural disasters. And so that's the male. The female is Demeter, the goddess of fertility, the goddess of the earth. So this is both human fertility and the fertility of the earth. And if Zeus raped her and she had a daughter, and then he allowed Hades, the god of the underworld, to abduct his daughter and take her to the underworld. Well, she got really mad. And so she starved him out. She said, I'm not going to let anything grow. So that's the power of Demeter. And we're harming her too, right? We're having floods. So some of the land is not fertile. we're having droughts, so we're having more deserts. So symbolically, or in terms of Greek myth, if you had this religion, you would say, we are committing pride and we are harming Demeter, and we're going to pay the price. It's also true that men's sperm is 40% less. Men have 40% less sperm than they used to. So human fertility is going way down. The number of infertile couples is going way down. And of course, we have technology to try to fix that. But I mean, our technology is not going to fix everything. We have to develop a different attitude. We have to develop a different worldview, and we have to respect the creation. So I think all the religious traditions have that you respect the creation or you respect karma. You know, they have different versions, but they all agree that you have to respect powers that are greater than we are. That is not a modern view. It's an ancient view, and it's now the system's view that we're trying to change the paradigm, but it's just a long haul. This is Hades. So Hades and Persephone are the god and goddess of the underworld. So Persephone was Demeter's daughter, that Hades saw her, and he asked her father Zeus if he could have her, steal her, take her into the underworld. And Zeus said yes. And then, you know, Demeter got pretty mad about it. Well, I taught this class in Bangladesh to a bunch of girls from Southeast Asia, and they just told all these stories that their sister, their aunt, they got married off. There's a child marriage that some rich guy, often a rich older guy, will see, you know, their relative, and he wants to marry her, and the father approves of it, even when the girl does not want to marry. So it happens all the time. Then the Hades, the stories of Hades in the Iliad, the message of those stories is that you have to think about how you live, because you're going to leave a legacy behind. People are going to tell stories about you. And if you were a wicked person, that's the story you leave behind. And if you were good, then you leave another. So it's not a matter of whether you're going to roast in hell or sit in heaven. It's a matter of what story do you want to leave behind? So that's humanistic, right? You are responsible for creating a better world for your children and grandchildren. When you don't do that, that's the worst evil. All right. So Apollo is the god of reason. Sorry. Apollo is the god of reason. Now, this is during the Enlightenment, Westerners tried to set up a whole culture based on Apollo. But the Greeks knew that that's not going to work. Apollo is STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, right? We can't create a whole civilization with that, because Apollonian powers can be driven by greed, the desire for power, the desire for glory, the desire for pleasure. So it's important that you have the right character so that you use your knowledge for the right reason, for the right goals. And Apollo himself was very immature emotionally. So he chased around young women and he raped them. And if they rejected him, he took revenge on them. He was really nasty. And I asked my students for their assignment was to think of somebody they know who's like this. And I'm telling you, they had plenty of stories of friends, like classmates or parents or uncles or sisters. They knew a lot of this type of person. It was very surprising. And then he also is indifferent to justice. So in the Trojan War, he was on the side that had the just cause. It was definitely had a war that had to be fought. And he was on the right side, but that side got so disorganized that he switched sides because the side with the wrong cause was much better governed and organized. Well, what is the analogy today? Today, there are many companies run by CEOs, right? People who run corporations. They are very rational, right? They're good at engineering, science, technology. Bill Gates, the Koch brothers, all these people, but they trade in their wife. Gates didn't do this. A number of them trade in their wife for a younger model every 10 or 15 years and create a new family. Rupert Murdoch did that. And the kids then fight for, the Fox News, who gets to run it. He's got two families and they're going to start fighting like crazy. And then they're indifferent to justice, right? So Murdoch, very smart, knows how to make money, but he's wicked, right? He doesn't care if he destroys democracy. So that's Apollo. Now his twin sister is Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. So Apollo creates cities, right? Skyscrapers, buildings. This is the god of the city. But Artemis is his twin sister. She's the goddess of the wilderness. So she would be the environmentalist who keeps saying, you've got to stop doing all this Apollonian stuff. You've got to respect the natural world. Ares is the god of war. And so he's the one that can go into a situation and face danger and fear, even fear of death. The trouble with Ares, he's the god of honor, because people honor someone who's willing to give their life for the security of the city. But he also becomes brutal. Like he just wants to prove how machismo he is. So he goes during the war with his sword is double-sided. He just kills people on both sides. And Zeus condemns him. Athena condemns him. And then Hera also condemns him, I'll talk about in a minute. But the message is that try to avoid war, because war brutalizes people. And they go to an extreme and they just start killing when they don't need to, and they start massacring. So it's much better to engage in diplomacy and to prevent war. But if you do have to go, make sure to Athena has to guide Ares, her little half-brother, and tell him what to do and what not to do. Hera is his mother and Athena's stepmother. Athena had a different mother. So Hera is the goddess of honor. Now, these are the kind of people, usually women. She's married to Zeus. He's running the system, the laws, the institutions. She is having the charity balls and all the things like the library committee. In the US, there's a library board and there's a city council and there's charity balls and volunteer activities. All of these things weave people together to make the society strong. And that's very honorable. Dionysus and Aphrodite are the god and goddess of sensuality. So there's nothing wrong with hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, and touching. So all of the ancient wisdom traditions value the arts a lot, right? Music, poetry. The Quran is poetic. And when people read it, it's like poetry. It's like music. And every culture has its sort of, the dance is related to it. And also the mosques are beautifully designed, beautifully organized, so that the visual sense, the whole sense you get when you walk into a mosque or a cathedral, and is that it's beautiful and it gets you beyond your merely physical self. But that's natural for people to enjoy visual, auditory for their own sake, not related to survival, just because it's beautiful. So it's an affirmation of our humanity, and it gets us to our spirituality. So Dionysus is the god of wine, and he's also pretty wild. He has a background that explains why he's wild, but I don't have time for that. But he's the god of the theater because he's the only god that dies and is reborn. And so in the theater, they take these irrational passions and they blow them up so that people can see. And then you're supposed to die, right? You flush it out so that you can be reborn to have a positive desire to make a difference in this world. So Hephaestus is the god of the forge, and he's married to Aphrodite. And so he's the craftsman. He makes things, but because he's married to Aphrodite, he makes them beautifully, right? So you have beautiful furniture, you have beautiful dishes, you have beautiful, so that your material needs are met, but they're met in a way that every time you look at something, you know that it was carefully crafted by somebody who loves beauty, who wants it to be beautiful just for its own sake, not just to feed yourself, right, in a bowl. It's a beautiful bowl, and it tells a story, and it has design and color and all sorts of great stuff. The trouble with Aphrodite is that she was unfaithful. She was very attracted to Ares. And so Ares and Aphrodite are sex and aggression. And so every Hollywood movie has to have sex and aggression or it doesn't sell. And so she's attracted to him, but they can't stand each other after a while. And so she runs back to Hephaestus. So I think that makes a lot of sense psychologically, that really happens. And again, my students tell these stories that are unbelievably appropriate. So Hestia is the goddess of the hearth. So she doesn't sit on a throne on Mount Olympus. She gives up her place because she doesn't have an ego. She doesn't want to get involved in all that drama. So she steps down and she creates this hearth, this fire, and fire is representative of the light of the mind. When you recognize something, when you have an insight, it's a light, right? You can see things you couldn't see before. So all of these stories, hopefully the person listening goes, oh yeah, I'm recognizing, I'm recognizing, I'm remembering, I'm recollecting all the data, from my life. And the stories are about patterns. And so all of a sudden you see the pattern in what your life has been. So she's the one who tries to get people together, get off your throne, come and talk about this. And the flame is also about, she's at the fireside in every house. Her presence is at the hearth. It's to make food and to keep people warm in the wintertime. And then you feed their bodies, and then you feed their psyche, their soul. And then once you get the stories, and there's stories about how to live, you take the flame, and Hermes has a torch, and he's the messenger. So he takes the torch from Mount Olympus down to human beings. And so this lecture, that's what I've tried to do, right? I've tried to be Hestia, who's telling you about these patterns. And then you have to be Hermes, and you have to go take those ideas and apply them to your own lives. And then when you do that, you're going to realize this is true universally. Like, it doesn't matter if you're Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim or an atheist or anybody who really wants to flourish, wants to live a good life, really should know these stories and should apply them and to themselves, so that when they get into a situation where they want to get revenge, or they want something irrational, that they'll remember the story and also apply it to people they know and tell the people they know, look, you're being possessed. Aphrodite has possessed you, and you're obsessed with sexual attraction. You've got to stop because it creates all these problems. And so you try to converse with people you know. And then as a citizen, you get together and talk about what's just. So you can say, okay, what would Athena think of this? Is this the wisest thing to do? Or is it an institution that's just going to allow the rich to get richer? Or is it really going to help everybody to flourish? So that's kind of the basic foundation. So then I hope you can understand why that fits with Panchasila. I actually think Mr. Sukarno, he studied in the West. I think he knew this stuff. But he doesn't mention that, right? He mentions Hindu, and either it's just totally by accident, or else the reason he didn't mention it is because there were some Aristotelian Muslims, Avicena and Averos, in southern Spain, and they were declared heretics at some point. So, there might be a political reason why he didn't bring it up. Because it isn't technically so much a part of Indonesian culture. He said things like, I'm everything, I'm all these religions. But anyway, that's what I think is my place. That's what I want to do, is talk to Indonesians about their culture, how they grew up, their scholarship. I want them to be humanistic, to just be honest, and not to try and mold their minds into positivism or deconstruction or anything like that, but be the humanist, be the Muslim humanist that they are. And then they should write journal articles that are where they're being true to themselves, and they're communicating to Westerners how valuable Muslim humanism is, because Indonesia has by far the most moderate Muslims. They are Muslims who are humanists. But, I'm the messenger, I think, who can tell you, yes, I can explain it, but I want you to tell me what you care about. And then I'll link that to the Greek tradition, and we can write articles together. But you would be the main author, not me. It would start with you. I've just seen some Indonesian scholars trying desperately to fit their ideas into Western categories that really aren't ancient humanism at all. And I just want them to be able to do it in a way that systems thinking, we're in a new paradigm. So neuroscience is saying, gee, those Greeks knew what they were talking about, and those religious traditions are actually psychologically healthy. Well, yes, I know. Any Muslim humanist Indonesian already knows that. But okay, so now it's becoming acceptable. So environmentalism, the ancients knew that. Neuroscience, psychology, the ancients knew that. There's a lot of things they knew, but we should combine that with all the knowledge and all the technology that we've gotten since then, so we can combine that together and create a global civilization, which is what we all have to do, or we're all going to die. So that's the end. I know it's probably longer, but it all fits together. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. It seems the name of Hermes inspire for the woman, because there is a luxury a woman bag for Hermes. Thank you, everyone, joining us for tonight, this evening. This is the first from 3 series of online program with Prof. Marta from Lyon College in the city of Arkansas. Before we start for opening the Q&A, Prof. Marta, would you like to introduce a bit little about the Lyon College so our colleague can identify and learn a lot about your college, please?
Okay. Let me give just a little bit of what I have in mind for these 4 lectures. Is that okay? So this lecture was just about some of the basic humanistic values. And then next time, I'm going to talk about democracy, because I think all of you know that the Greeks, Athens is famous for being a democracy, right? So, and there were flaws in the democracy, but I will talk about how it really was well structured and they corrupted it and they lost it. And I can tell you the pattern there is something that's going on right now as we speak around the world. So I've watched my own country undermine and destroy its democracy. And Indonesia is teetering, but then every democracy is, but there are patterns in the problem, the kinds of corruption. So I'll talk about that next time. And the third one, I'll talk about Aristotle's virtues, and then how Jesus, Muhammad, Confucius, Buddha, all these people, their way of life includes that, and the United Nations and that sustainability goals, things like that. And then the last one is where I can work with colleagues on what sort of articles they'd like to collaborate with me on. And I've been given permission to be the editor of 2 separate, 1 book, 1 journal that has 15 articles written about Muslim humanism. And probably it'll be mostly Indonesians, but the call for papers or the call for materials is international. So anybody can respond. So I'm sure they won't all be Indonesian, but I'd like it to be as interdisciplinary, a lot of different disciplines. I'd also like to have professionals, people who are doctors or business people or lawyers, people in any walk of life. And then especially Indonesians, I'd like to ask them, how do you see Pancasila as part of your personal life and your professional life? And then I can tie that to the Greeks. So anybody you know who might be interested, that's kind of where we're going. So my school is, you want me to talk more about liberal arts education or?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So liberal arts education is you educate for the moral virtues and the intellectual virtues together. So it's character development. Students, okay, here's how it started. That Plato lived. He was born at a time when Athens was at its peak, and they had won the war against the Persians. So their enemies had left, and the Greeks could just flourish. They didn't have any more enemies attacking them. But within 30 years, Athens corrupted their society, and the citizens elected a dictator. So Plato started a school where you educate the future rulers, and you explain to them, here's how we lost our democracy. And even if they're part of a monarchy or part of an aristocracy, the lesson is, if you have the natural ability, the opportunity to come to this school, right? That you must have been born pretty smart. You've gotten this far through school, and your parents want you to come here, then you need to know that you should not go home and abuse your privilege. You need to use your privilege to promote the well-being of everyone in your society, or within 30 years, you will lose. Even if you're in a monarchy, it could turn into a civil war or an aristocracy, because if you use the system for greed or power, the poor will eventually rebel. And so don't pretend you can get away with this. It's idealistic to think you can get away with it. It's realistic to teach future rulers to use their privilege for the well-being of their people, or their children are going to inherit a terrible situation. So, so that was the academy, right? So when that model got imitated, especially over at Cambridge and Oxford in England, and then it got brought over because most of the people who set up the US were from Britain, and they were Episcopalians. And so that was Cambridge and Oxford were Episcopalian schools. And they came over and they made these schools. So the school that I teach at, for example, has a mission statement. And it says, that students will learn how to think clearly and analyze and all that. But then it says, our goal is for them, when they're adults, to be liberally minded adults. So what are these adults? They have to be committed to truth, because everything has degrees of truth, and it's not relativism. They have to be intellectually honest. Don't claim to know what you don't know. And this is why they wanted to unite reason and faith, because when you don't, people claim to know all sorts of stuff that they don't know. And they're very hubris, they're in the name of humility and loving God, they actually commit crimes of hubris in their relation to each other. And they justify judging other people, oppressing other people. So commitment to truth, intellectual honesty, fairness to opposing points of view. So you get exposed to a lot of different points of view. You have to take courses in many different subjects, so you understand the methodology. What is the worldview? What are the assumptions that a chemist has about the world? What about a sociologist? And how do they study their subject? And so the students have to really figure out what's out there and come up with some coherent worldview that's comprehensive. And then the fourth one is patience with complexity and ambiguity. So you don't oversimplify things. You keep an open mind. You say, if you make a decision or have an opinion, you've already accounted for a whole lot of stuff. You're intellectually honest, you're committed to truth, you're fair, but you have to admit it's complicated. There's things I probably don't know, and it's ambiguous. Like, this might look like the best decision, but when somebody makes it, there's all these unintended consequences. So even if you've tried to consider for that, you have to constantly keep an open mind. And after you do something, figure out, did it work or not, and why? Why did it work or why didn't it work? So then, in a similar situation, and you're always making analogies, you'll say, okay, this is like that situation. And either we did that worked out. So how would we do the same here? Or that didn't work out at all. So how can we avoid that mistake? That's how you develop practical wisdom. And then the last one is tolerance of reasoned dissent. So this is a problem in the sense that what do you do, and this is happening in my country, when people who really are in it really want power, or they think the only real religious believers are intolerant. And like in the case of Indonesia, they really think it should be an Islamicist country, right? And so what do you do with people who aren't willing to listen to reason and aren't willing to acknowledge the humanity of other people and are doing all sorts of things with horrible consequences? That was true of the communists also. Like if the communists try to take over, they're going to cause a civil war because there's too many Indonesians that are not going to accept it. So, but right now, the big problem, I think, is mostly Islamicists. Well, what do? You tolerate them? You let them take over universities? I mean, so that's a big problem. It's a big problem in my country because wealthy, rich people who want to promote authoritarianism allow the religious fundamentalists to go into colleges and try to convert students in a way that undermines the mission of the college. So each college is trying to figure out what to do with this, but it's very controversial and very difficult. You don't have to tolerate somebody who's telling you they know all sorts of stuff they don't know. And I have a lot of my students think that I'm going to hell, partly because I talk to Muslims. So just so you know,
Thank you.
happens in the US. All right.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Beck, or thank you, Martha, for the kind explanation about how the connectivity between Pancasila and ancient Greek civilizations. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the end of our lectures, online lectures for tonight. And then we already listened and learned from Martha how the Pancasila connectivity with the ancient Greek civilizations in the philosophy context. And then for tomorrow evening, we will have another topic. I name it as the teaching citizen and gain wisdom, learning from ancient Athens.
Yeah.
This is the second meeting with Martha, and then hopefully, if you like, you can go to my YouTube and then see again if you want to watch how the explanation about our first meeting. And if you like, there is a presence over there in the chat box. You can type, and then as the appreciations of your presence tonight, we will send you a kind token of appreciation as the electronic certificate for you. Thank you, Martha. Thank you for everyone. And I would like to thanks to my colleague, Institut Agama Islam DDI Sidenten Rapang. Then we have Stayap Nasjene Ponto, and then my colleague from Tia Abdul Haris. We are three tonight, even that somehow we are preparing for Burasa, but we still maintain to listen and learn from Martha. And then we will see her in Makassar, and inshallah on 26th of July. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our online meeting for tonight. Thank you. And then again, thank you to Martha.
Because I talk so long, I can stay on.
No problem.
Well, I can stay on. I'm a host, and you can shut it down, and I'll stay and just
no
talk
problem.
to people.
No problem, Martha. We will still have a series of our discussion, and we are more than happy because somehow you need to prepare for going bed. Because maybe there is different time between Arkansas and Jakarta, but no problem. So 1 hour program, I do believe this is a very good time to learn from you and how the about the Pancasila from the outsider. Yeah, since we are in Indonesia, the era of Jokowi, we celebrate 1 of June as the day of Pancasila, and the June is the month of Sukarno. So we have a good opportunity to dig again, to learn again about the Pancasila and so on. And then thank you very much. And then tomorrow night, tomorrow evening, in the same times, we will see Marta again. And then I already mentioned the topic. The topic for tomorrow, it's about the teaching citizen and gain wisdom, learning from ancient Athens. Thank you very much. For those who are Muslim, I invite you to recite Hamdalah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin, to end our online lectures for tonight. Have a nice evening and good night, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Marta. Have a nice
Thank you.
dream for tonight. Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.